Thanks for tuning in, guys. My name is Richard Donald. I'm a record producer, songwriter, and instrumentalist, and wanted to invite you guys into my studio apartment. Literally, it is a studio apartment because I want to show you guys how I put music together. So the beat that I want to show you guys today is called Intermedio. I don't know why I called it Intermedio. A lot of times I just name beat something until I actually meet with an artist and we write a song to it. It's kind of like an 808 kind of MIDI sounding trap beat. Let's just dive right in. We got an open Pro Tool session going on right here. So with hip hop, it's a little bit different. I approach each genre with a different, approach. Hip hop, I normally try to make loops, I guess you could say, for lack of a better phrase. And I normally start with the drums. So right now I have just the kick drum highlighted. And this is actually the chorus section of the song. The way I put beats together, especially for hip hop, is I normally start with the hook. I try to make as many layers as possible for the hook, and then I kind of thin things out for the verses. As you can see, that layers are missing. But I typically always start with the kick. Boom, boom, boom. Da boom, boom, boom. And then we can put a little snare in there. And you know what I mean? I normally start with the drums because the drums are going to give you that attitude that you need for hip hop. A lot of times people will start with a sample or they start with, piano, whatever the case is. For me, it just so happens to work that I start with the kick and the snare because that's where you're going to get the attitude from. So with Intermedio, I'm really going for this 808 trap style kind of hip hop, aggressive street kind of sound. With hip hop, especially like more of a rugged street kind of hip hop, I always start with the drums. I always try to build up all my layers to make the hook. And then from the hook, I can just remove layers and make verses out of it just by thinning things out. As you guys can see here, this middle section right here, where you see all the layers kind of combined together, this is going to be the hook or the chorus of the song. And I just kind of thin things out around here and around here. You can see how, it kind of thins out. Those are the verses. With hip hop, some people, they start with the hook, or not the hook. Some people start with a sample, they start with piano, they start with different things. For me, I have to start with the drums because that's where I get the attitude. And I think that, the kick and the snare, that boom and that bap, that's the spine, that's the backbone of the beat. So let me give you guys a little taste of what I did here. Very standard trap kind of 808 sound here. Just very standard boom, 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 boom. And I like 808 because 808 is such a classic, clean drum tone that's going to knock in everybody's speakers, especially when they're on those rides in the car. You know what I mean? Where I come from, we like to go on car rides, and we like to let it rumble. Let me throw the snare in there for you guys. Now, what makes it kind of trap to me, or what I think is trap, besides the actual character, the lyrics, and the things like that, what makes a beat trap to me is the ricky-ticky 808 hi-hats. So let me throw those in there for you. And sometimes I'll play this. A lot of times with a trap, I actually will mouse click in every single, It's kind of weird because in rock, I'm so used to playing a drum set live, but with hip hop, you got to actually use your mouse and get in there. Let me show you how I edited this. I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. This is the hi-hats right here. All these little dots. I had to go in there with my mouse and click in every single one. These are the notes, and down here, this is the expression, how loud or soft each hit is. So I go in there and I draw, the different intensities of each note. So, even though it's electronic, even though it's not a real instrument, you gotta compensate for that, It'll sound very robotic if you don't compensate and go in there and make it more human-like. Now, one of the things that I like to do, and several other producers like to do, is they like to put a lot of low end in their hip hop beats. Now, one of the nice things that Roland did when they came out with the 808 drum collection is they made this fake sounding kind of timpani drums. Timpani is typically like what you hear in classical music, but they tried to make a, you know, an electric version of it back in the early 80s, and it sounds terrible if you're really trying to recreate a timpani, but it sounds dope if you're trying to make the speakers knock and you're trying to make a trap beat. So I'll give you guys a sample of what that sounds like. It's almost like a kick drum, but it's different because it has that long release, that long boom, 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 boom. You know what I mean? It just explodes, and it sounds really cool when you add it to the rest of the. That's enough to break somebody's trunk. That's enough to break somebody's trunk. Back home, in the small town of Hockessin, where I come from, we used to drive little Honda Civics, and people will put like exhaust kits, and they will put, you know, 12-inch subwoofers and all kinds of crazy stuff. And literally between the speaker system and the exhaust system that they put in, their trunk would fall apart. It would rattle. The screws would come loose on their car. That's what I aim for with every single beat, yo. I'm trying to make people's car fall apart, yo. They're gonna be in the middle of the highway and just the back end of their car just falls off, yo. That's that 60 hertz right there. So now I'm just gonna solo all of these drum elements, these drum layers together so you can hear the overall loop. And I'll show you what I'm working with over here. I don't really use too many effects. I use battery for my drums. You know, it's really like a $200 program. It's really nothing special about that. And I'll use a compressor. This happens to be the Chris Lord Algae compressor. Very simple: input, output, attack, release. You know what I mean? You just got to play with the knobs until you get it to knock right. You know, I'm not one of those people that are going to sit here and try to lecture you how to use a compressor. And I like the Artist series. You know, a lot of people say that it's cheating, but I think that, you know, these guys are amazing engineers, and they come up with some great plugins. And, you know, why pay thousands and thousands of dollars for their analog equipment when you could just buy their plugin? And, you know, just because you're using a plugin doesn't mean that you're cheating. You still got to know what you're doing, you know. So I'm a fan of Eddie Kramer. I'm a fan of Tony Maserati. I'm a fan of Chris Lord Algae. You know what I mean? They got great plugins. If you guys don't know about that, go to Waves. You know, Waves got great plugins. Definitely check them out. So, you know, long story short, with my drums, I'll use battery a lot of times for the drum sound. I'll use a compressor to kind of beef it up. And then typically just a little bit of EQ and reverb, you know what I mean, just to make it knock right. So pretty much once I have the drums down, that's really the hardest part. You gotta spend so much time on the drums just to make it knock, and I always get happy once the drums are done, because then the fun part comes in. The fun part for me is coming up with the first layer. The first layer to me is the layer. It's the one that everybody thinks of when you name the song, or it's the catchiest part. So you guys are already familiar with the drums and stuff that we've put in. Keep in mind, I'm still over here in the chorus section, you know. Keep in mind that, you know, when I was actually making this, none of this was here yet. It was just the drum loop, and I was just adding layers and layers and making it thicker and thicker and thicker. It's almost like making a sandwich. You know what I mean? When you make a sandwich, you got to start out with the bread. And in this metaphor, the drums are the bread. So you got the bread's laid out, you know what I mean? That's, you know, now the fun part is putting in all the ingredients and really making it pop. So I have my drums here. Now I'm gonna add my first layer. Labeled it kind of funny, so I'm not sure. I'm using Massive. Massive is another pretty standard, industry standard synthesizer. A lot of times I start with a preset, and then the preset, they got it set up so that, you know, it's a library of all these different presets that come with the program. And then once I pick my preset, I go into the actual synthesizer and I adjust the knobs and really shape the sound. So let me show you guys this this synth layer that I added. You guys are familiar with the, the drums that I laid. And now I'm going to show you the synth layer. So that shit in my heart. So once you got your drums laid down, you got your kick, snare, hi-hat, you got your your whatever you're doing underneath to kind of beef up the low end. You got your synth layer. You're gonna want to add like some sort of bass line, some sort of like pedestal to kind of lift things up. So that's the next layer I'm gonna show you. For this beat, even though it's kind of trap and I'm going for this hip hop thing, I've been heavily influenced living out here in LA, listening to a lot of chill step, a lot of dubstep, a lot of grindhouse, a lot of different things that are going on out here. So I'm gonna put a little bit of wubs in there, a little wub. So we already got this kind of element going on. So I'm gonna put a little bit of wubs in there. What do we use for that? I'm going to use Massive again. Massive is a very versatile program, very versatile synthesizer. I'm not really going to go into the intricacies of what I did to make this really sound like dubstep. There's a lot of tutorials online about that, but I'm just going to show you how I kind of fit it into the mix. Listen how those just marry each other. You got the wubs and you got that synth on top. They just... That's one of the things, that's one of the tests that I always put my beats to. You should be able to play individual layers together and mix and match the different layers, and they should all be a perfect marriage. It shouldn't just be like it only matches together when everything's together. Nah, isolate the different layers and make sure that they match up cohesively with any other layer. You know what I mean? And that's when you know that you've really done a good job at arranging. So, I mean, for the most part, those are the main elements of the song. Everything else is what I like to call ear candy. It's just icing on top of the cake, a little bit of garnish. As you guys can tell, I like using food metaphors because to me, I feel like a chef. I feel like I'm really putting together a feast, even though it's a beat. So we got our drums, we got our synth, we got our dubstep style bass line. I'm gonna take the dubstep style bass line and the synth out for right now. I'm just gonna really show you guys some of the ear candy elements that I'm talking about. I labeled this track Bubbles, and I just want you guys to hear what this sounds like. I'm just gonna take out some of the drums so you can really hear it. You guys hear that? I mean, that in itself is kind of annoying, but in the background of all these other elements, it's just ear candy. It just really kind of, heightens the experience of it all. And the nice thing about this bubble element that I'm doing is it's got this panning element going, panning characteristic. And what I mean by panning is that, speakers normally come in pairs, and panning means that you're going from side to side or whatever the case may be. So it's not just straight up bubbles coming at you frontal. It's not just coming at you one way. It's like bubbles, 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 bubbles. So while you're in the car riding around with your boys or whatever, and you hear that bass line, you hear that 808 knocking in the trunk, and you got the trebles sounding really nice because of the the synth layers and the dubstep bass line I put in there. At the same time, you got this really dynamic bubble kind of sound coming at you from side to side to side. So that's what I mean by ear candy. It's just taking something that's already hot and taking it over the edge. you know? Okay, so once you have all your layers kind of recorded, it's really just a matter of copying and pasting, you know what I mean? And then taking out some layers to kind of make excitement or make room for the verses. And that's what I've kind of done in this section right here. And I want to play some of the ear candy that I made specifically for the verse. So you guys are already familiar with the drums and the synth. You guys are familiar with that. I'm going to show you the ear candy I put in there. And I labeled this horror. It's really subtle. That's the ear candy right there. Sounds like wind. And it just kind of swells and disappears and swells and disappears and really just makes the song a little bit more magical. So this is pretty much my workflow. This is how I put beats together, especially hip-hop beats. It's one of the simpler genres, but it's one of the ones that brings me the most joy when the song is done. This is an ice cold beat. I can say so myself that this shit knocks in the motherfucking car. This has been an autopsy on one of the coldest beats that I've made, Intermedio. Let's see how it all comes together from the start.